Crossing parallel worlds, Ting inherited a group on the brink of bankruptcy. I originally thought about the mercenary industry, but every day was a precarious time. It would be better to take this opportunity to close the group under my name, and then wash my hands and completely withdraw from the vicious mercenary industry. Unexpectedly, a golden finger called the strongest mercenary system suddenly appeared. As long as you gain enough reputation, you can purchase any military weapons and equipment in the strongest mercenary system, from pistol smoke grenades to aircraft carrier bombers, everything is there. At the same time, according to the system requirements, completing relevant employment tasks can also earn very generous rewards. From then on, Ting, who carried the strongest mercenary system, led his group to embark on a journey to overthrow the entire mercenary industry. Keywords of the novel. Inheriting a mercenary group at the beginning without a pop-up window, inheriting a mercenary group at the beginning. Download the complete TXT series, Inheriting a Mercenary Group at the Beginning. Latest chapters for reading. Chapter 1. The Strongest Mercenary System. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. The Strongest Mercenary System. Asia. Moncala, the central city of Dhaka, at 3 p.m. On the main roads in the city, traffic flows like a dragon. Looking around, on both sides of the relatively spacious road, there are various stalls with banners and umbrellas, as well as pedestrians walking around haphazardly in motorcycles taking shortcuts, making this main road leading to the port crowded and slow in traffic flow. At this moment, amidst the chaotic traffic, on an off-road pickup truck, wearing a simple gray-green T-shirt and combat overalls, with a tough face and a somewhat serious expression between his eyebrows, Ting was holding the steering wheel in one hand, controlling the off-road pickup truck to slowly move forward with the traffic, while the other hand was holding a cigarette and sending it to his mouth. Whispering. Looking at the dirty and messy street view outside the car window, as well as the slow-moving traffic, Ting's dark brown pupils couldn't help but breed a hint of annoyance. However, as soon as he thought about the commission he was about to receive, his annoyance subsided a lot. At this point, the Western white man sitting in the back seat of the off-road pickup truck gently patted his wife's shoulder as if comforting, and then gathered the courage to tentatively ask Ting in English, "Mr. Liu, may I ask? How long will it take for us to reach the port?" Upon hearing the sound, Ting casually threw the cigarette but he had smoked out of his hand towards the window and responded in English with an indifferent expression, "About half an hour." A few short words, concise and concise. The man in the back seat, after glancing at his wife, didn't ask any more questions. Half an hour passed in a blink of an eye. By the banks of the Pundit River. The whole car was covered in a grey and hazy atmosphere, and the off-road pickup truck in its original color was almost indistinguishable. It parked smoothly at the busy and noisy inland port of Dhaka. Turn off the engine, get off the car, open the rear seat door, and Ting's actions flow smoothly. "It's here." Ting nodded towards the outside of the car, gesturing for the couple inside to get off. The reason why he personally went to open the door was not because he was polite, but because he had a prior agreement with the couple in the car. During the employment period, without his orders, they were not allowed to get off the car. Okay. The man in the car nodded and agreed eagerly, then quickly got off the car with his wife. Perhaps fearing Ting's mercenary status, or perhaps fearing Ting's 10mm Colt pistol pinned to his waist, the Western white man quickly took out a craft paper bag from his bag and handed it to Ting, saying, "Thank you very much, Mr. Liu. This is the remaining commission, can you please check the amount?" Ting held half of his cigarette but in his mouth, frowned, reached out to take the leather paper bag, took out the cash inside, and roughly glanced at it. Seeing that the thickness was not bad, he waved his hand and said without lifting his head, "You can go now." The couple listened to Ting's words and solemnly thanked him again before turning around and leaving. Soon, their figures merged into the crowd of people boarding the ship and disappeared. After they left, Lu Ting closed the rear door and turned to sit in the driver's seat. Looking at the cash in the cowhide paper bag in his hand again, Lu Ting's serious and tense face gradually relaxed. Then he couldn't help but laugh at himself and say, after working hard for 2 days, I went all the way to earn so much. I'm afraid there's no mercenary who's doing worse than me, right? Looking at the bustling port outside the car window, Lu Ting's gaze gradually settled and his thoughts began to diverge. As a great young man in his prime, he should have lived an ordinary and peaceful life. But, an unexpected Lake Fall incident allowed him to travel to this blue star world that is highly similar to Earth, and his new identity turned out to be the only son of a mercenary armed group leader. Adhering to the mentality of settling for what comes first, at the beginning of his journey, Lu Ting quickly accepted the fact of his journey. After all, compared to the conventional life of a social animal in his previous life, the world of mercenaries is full of money, weapons, slaughter, and freedom. For him, that still has a huge attraction. But to my surprise, in the second year of Lu Ting's journey to this world, the mercenary armed group at home experienced a sudden change. His cheap old man was on an important employment mission while leading a team. Unfortunately, he was surrounded and killed by the enemy due to a misunderstanding of intelligence. He was also shot and killed, along with his most loyal and capable subordinates, all of whom perished in the afterlife. So, the heavy responsibility of managing and maintaining a mercenary armed group was handed over to Lu Ting. To be honest, Lu Ting also really wants to run this armed group, but unfortunately, he is more than willing in this regard and lacks strength. Even though he learned a lot of related knowledge from that cheap old man during the year he traveled, the lack of practical experience still left Lu Ting completely unable to cope. Moreover, a more fatal point is that his cheap father has just fallen, and those opponents who have been eyeing his family's armed group are quickly like killing fish, smelling blood, uniting to form an alliance and pressure him together. At the same time, they also spent a high price to pry away a large number of mercenaries from the armed group. You know, these mercenaries were already materialists, so naturally whoever offered the higher price or was more reliable would go against them. In addition, at that time, Lu Ting seemed to have no ability to run an armed group. Despite Lu Ting's efforts to support himself in just 6 months, despite being unable to stand on his own, the mercenary armed group under his name became an irresistible empty shell. The group members gradually dispersed and even faced bankruptcy. At that time, watching the increasingly depressed group day by day, Lu Ting, who had been tired for half a year, finally couldn't hold on anymore. He thought to himself that it was better to completely close the group now. Wash your hands in a golden basin, while you still have some extra money in hand, find another way out. Unexpectedly, just at the critical moment, a golden finger called the strongest mercenary system was bound to Lu Ting's body. As a traveler, Lu Ting naturally knows how powerful the system is. According to the self-introduction of the strongest mercenary system at the time, the system will automatically activate upon receiving a hiring task for the first time, and then every time one is hired, the system will automatically generate the corresponding task. As long as Lu Ting completes the employment task, he can receive corresponding rewards. The higher the difficulty and danger of hiring tasks, the more generous the final task rewards will be. Meanwhile, as long as Lu Ting has enough reputation, he can purchase any of the most advanced military weapons and equipment in the strongest mercenary system anytime, anywhere. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Super Serum. Risk-free version. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 Super Serum. Risk-free version. When Lu Ting heard this introduction, he felt a surge of blood and energy, and was extremely excited. Isn't this equivalent to carrying an unlimited arsenal on oneself? After binding the strongest mercenary system, Lu Ting no longer had the idea of closing the group and washing his hands. Although he knew that the road ahead would definitely not be easy, he still made a resolute decision and chose to continue operating this indestructible armed group under his name. However, until now, Lu Ting's indestructible armed group is still the only one, which is quite bleak. After all, for most of the 6 months after the death of Cheap Dad, the reputation of the indestructible armed group in the mercenary circle has been completely wiped out, falling into an unknown place. It is obviously not easy to regain its reputation. Furthermore, Ting currently has no spare money to recruit troops and horses. He can only rely on his own strength, starting from some small employment tasks, slowly developing and starting from scratch. However, the beginning of everything is difficult. Although the ideas are broad, the reality is very cruel. For a long time after binding to the strongest mercenary system, Ting contacted various channels but was still unable to undertake any employment tasks, which was also related to the reputation of the indestructible armed group. Therefore, he has not been able to complete the necessary conditions for activating the system, nor has he had the opportunity to personally experience whether the strongest mercenary system he bound really has such amazing abilities. However, just 2 days ago, looking forward to the stars and the moon, Ting finally received his first employment task in the past few months on the mercenary dark web, which was to escort the newlywed couple to the inland port of Dhaka and leave by boat. Although this was Ting's first time going out alone to carry out an employment task, he remained very experienced throughout the entire process and did not show anyone anything wrong. On the one hand, it is because the original owner of Ting's body has received systematic training since childhood, and his abilities in all aspects are quite outstanding. After taking over this body, Ting never slacked off on various aspects of training, and during the year he traveled through, because he had always been in the armed group, he also learned many details about carrying out employment tasks. On the other hand, before deciding to take on this employment task, Ting had already conducted a comprehensive risk assessment and learned that the difficulty and danger of the task were not high. So, even though it was his first solo employment mission, Ting did not show any nervousness or panic, but ended it calmly and perfectly. Ding! The first employment mission is over. The strongest mercenary system has been activated. Suddenly, a strange mechanical voice rang out in his mind, pulling Ting back from his memories. After 2 seconds of reflection, he regained his senses and a particularly excited expression appeared on Ting's face. Here we go. After several months of waiting, the system was finally activated after the first employment task ended. And the next second, Ting felt a flash in front of him, a system panel that was only visible to him appeared in front of him. The strongest mercenary system, host. Ting, reputation. 0, task. Escort the Saw couple to the inland port of Dhaka, completed, reward. Settlement in progress. Seeing the last column on the system panel, the reward was being settled, and the hopeful expression in Ting's eyes suddenly became more intense. I don't know what the system will give me for this first task settlement reward. The strongest mercenary system was also very awesome, which did not make Jing wait much, and soon there was a sound again. First task settlement completed. Reward. Super Serum *1, risk.free version, what? When Ting heard the reward from the system, his first reaction was bewildered. Wait a moment, Super Serum. Can't it be the Super Soldier Serum from Captain America? Missed grass. Before Ting could regain his senses, soon a bottle of about 20 centimeters long, filled with blue liquid, appeared concretely in his right hand. A piece of information about Super Serum also appeared in Ting's mind. Super Serum. It's really the Super Soldier Serum among Captain America. Damn it. Looking at what he was holding in his hand, Ting's breathing couldn't help but become heavy, and his face could no longer contain a look of ecstasy. You know, this Super Serum can enhance the user's metabolic function and all bodily functions, enabling them to reach the peak of human potential. Moreover, the tube of Super Serum in his hand is still a version without any risk. That is to say, the biggest risk among the Captain of the United States, the Super Serum, is that there is no such thing as a big mental problem that affects people. Bully. Damn it. The system is truly not deceiving me. It's truly a system. Surprisingly, even things from virtual movies can be made. After calming down in the car for a full minute, Lu Ting finally recovered from the surprise of this first mission reward. Subsequently, he put this super serum, along with a cowhide paper bag containing cash, into the combat tactical backpack of the co-pilot next to him. Although Lu Ting is now very eager to try the effect of super serum, it is obvious that the environment he is currently in is crowded and not suitable for immediate use of super serum. If it causes any unnecessary commotion or attention, it's not good. Let's wait a little longer. After making a decision in his heart, Lu Ting had no intention of staying here anymore. He quickly ignited his off-road pickup truck and prepared to leave. However, he has no immediate plan to leave the country of Mongolia, and return to the headquarters of his armed group. He had already planned before, and in the coming time, he plans to stay in the city of Taka for a few more days to see if he can receive other employment tasks locally. Otherwise, it would be a waste of his time and cost to go all the way and only do an employment task. Buzzing. Just as Lu Ting was turning the front of the car to prepare to leave, the phone in his pants pocket unexpectedly received a vibrating call. Take out your phone and take a look, the screen shows an unfamiliar number. With a slight frown, Lu Ting didn't hesitate much. Even when he pressed the answer button, he put his phone in his ear and said, "Hello." His phone number is specifically listed on the employment dark web for contacting employment tasks. So, at this point, there is a call, and there is only one possibility, which is that there is an employment task coming to your door. End of this chapter. Chapter 3, New Hiring Tasks, Protecting Female Journalists. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3, New Hiring Tasks, Protecting Female Journalists. At this point, there is a call, and there is only one possibility, which is that there is an employment task coming to your door. And this is also what Lu Ting is most fond of now. Of course, he is not willing to accept any employment task. He still needs to make appropriate decisions based on his own abilities and the level of danger of the employment task. Next second, in the earpiece of the phone, a crisp female voice came from the familiar Chinese language. "Excuse me, is that Mr. Lu?" Lu Ting turned off the off-road pickup truck and responded in Chinese, yes. What's going on? Lu Ting's tone remained quite distant and indifferent, and he did not show any closeness because the other person might be from China. Those who engage in their profession must always maintain an outsider mindset and not be swayed by emotions. And here, the question asked by Lu Ting naturally refers to employment tasks. Soon, the woman at the end of the phone receiver also spoke out her needs directly. "It's like this. I am a Chinese female journalist who came to Mongolia, Ladakh to shoot a documentary about the lives of drug users at the bottom of the country. I urgently need to hire a bodyguard. At noon today, I saw on the dark web that your person is currently answering cards and can undertake employment tasks. I wonder if you have time, Mr. Lu, to take over my employment task next." Upon hearing this, Lu Ting did not immediately answer her, but his eyes narrowed slightly and his face showed a thoughtful expression, clearly considering the danger level of the task. The woman on the other end of the phone remained silent and waited quietly for Lu Ting to give a response. A few seconds later, Lu Ting spoke up and said, "So, edit your employment information into a text message and send it to me. I'll give you a reply in 2 minutes." "Okay." After a straightforward response, the Chinese female journalist voluntarily hung up the phone. Next, a pop-up message popped up, and after clicking on it, Lu Ting carefully examined it. The information contains a lot of content, including the basic identity information of the employer, the purpose of the trip, the location to be reached, and what Lu Ting needs to do during the employment period. The employment content is not particularly special, it's just the most ordinary bodyguard task. Even, this Chinese female journalist added one extra note, which is that perhaps it is not necessary for Lu Ting to follow throughout the journey, and nearby standby is sufficient when there is nothing else to do. Seeing this, Lu Ting finished reading all the employment information and frowned slightly, considering whether to take on this employment task. Every country is not lacking in drug users and traffickers, and Mengjiao is no exception. As far as Lu Ting knows, in Mengjiao, the drug dealers and drug users here are very rampant and dangerous. Because the rulers here are already hiding in secret with the poisonous insects, snakes, and rats. However, those dangerous and extreme drug traffickers are not within the scope of risk factors considered by Lu Ting. Because this Chinese female journalist mentioned in her employment mission information that she only had contact with some misguided drug users this time, and conducted some simple filming and interviews with them. Although Lu Ting is unaware of why a Chinese female journalist would venture to shoot such a documentary in Mengjiao, he believes that this employment task is completely acceptable within his own capabilities. After careful consideration, Lu Ting, who had decided to take on this employment task, took out his phone and called back the Huaxia female journalist. The phone was answered in almost a second, and Lu Ting didn't hesitate. He spoke up and said, "I can take your employment task, and the commission will be based on the price marked on the dark web. First, make a 1.3 deposit to my account, and pay the final payment after the employment is over." The commission price for each type of employment task varies, and the more dangerous the task, the higher the commission. Of course, the level of commission is also closely related to the strength of the mercenaries themselves. Like the mercenaries on the dark web who have strong personal strength, or the powerful hiring groups behind them, the commission prices are generally frighteningly high. No problem, the Huaxia female journalist on the other end of the phone, upon hearing that Lu Ting had taken on her employment task, readily agreed with a tone of joy, "I'll get you the deposit right away." Ding! At this moment, the system prompted the sound to come on. The system panel appeared in front of Lu Ting. The strongest mercenary system, host. Lu Ting, reputation. 0, task. Protecting Chinese female journalists who want to shoot documentaries about drug users. In progress, Lu Ting glanced at the system panel, paused, continued speaking, and confirmed the specific meeting time with the other party. "When will you arrive at the answer card?" 30 minutes later, I will disembark at the inland port in Dhaka. You can come directly to pick me up and then take me to the marked location. Upon hearing this answer, Lu Ting frowned slightly and then lowered his gaze to look at the watch on his left wrist, which happened to be exactly 4 o'clock in the afternoon. According to the information from the employment task, the location marked by this Chinese female journalist is in the notorious slum area of Mengjiao. Can we have about an hour more time? It's getting dark soon, so let's not talk about whether it's dangerous or not. The key is, why not shoot a documentary at this point? Is it so urgent? Although he felt a bit strange in his heart, since it was a request from his employer, as a mercenary, Lu Ting naturally wouldn't argue anything. Immediately, Lu Ting spoke up and said, "Okay, I'll wait for you outside gate 1. I'm driving a gray off-road pickup truck with a license plate of 6988. As soon as the words fell, Lu Ting hung up the phone, parked the car, and leaned against the backrest of the driver's seat with both hands clasped around his chest. His eyes narrowed slightly and he rested, quietly waiting for the employer to arrive. Time passes by minute by second, and 30 minutes pass in the blink of an eye. Originally sitting in the driver's seat, Lu Ting closed his eyes and took a nap when he heard footsteps approaching from far to near on the left side of his off-road pickup truck. Upon realizing this, he immediately opened his eyes. A Chinese woman, standing around 1.65 meters tall, wearing beige jumpsuits, carrying a black canvas bag and a neat high ponytail, suddenly entered Lu Ting's field of vision. The woman first glanced at the side of the car and seemed somewhat uncertain as she walked around to the front of the car. After seeing the license plate number clearly, she opened the passenger door and took off her sunglasses to look at Lu Ting in the driver's seat. She confirmed her identity and said, "Is that Mr. Lu?" End of this chapter. Chapter 4, Chaotic Slums. Use Super Serum. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Chapter 4, Chaotic Slums. Use Super Serum. Lu Ting, who had already seen the other party's photos, quickly recognized the Chinese woman in front of him as the employer of his employment mission. Immediately, he nodded and responded, "It's me, get in the car." As the words fell, Lu Ting easily started the car. Upon hearing this, the female journalist immediately sat in the passenger seat, secured her seat belt with her back hand, and half-jokingly said, "Mr. Lu, your car really needs to be washed. If it weren't for the license plate, I wouldn't recognize it even if I were to die. You're a gray car." Upon hearing her take the initiative to speak to him, Lu Ting glanced slightly at the female journalist. Most ordinary people, when faced with mercenaries like themselves, tend to have a sense of fear and may not even dare to breathe, let alone speak up willingly. Just like the couple that Lu Ting just bid farewell to before, apart from having a conversation with them when they confirmed their identities, they basically had no communication with Lu Ting for 2 days. And this Chinese female journalist, as soon as she got into the car, not only took the initiative to talk to Lu Ting, but also used this semi-joking tone. It seems that her courage is indeed better than that of ordinary people, and no wonder she dares to go alone to the gathering place of low-level drug users to shoot and interview them. Just don't know, is it a newborn calf not afraid of tigers, or is there something? Lu Ting only briefly glanced at her, and soon he withdrew his gaze. He did not follow the other person's words, but drove out and reminded, "Since you have decided to come here to shoot a documentary, you should be very clear that what you are going to next is not a good place. This is not Huaxia, there are some things that I need to agree with you in advance. Next, as long as we stay together, you must listen to my arrangements for everything. Additionally, you can go to interview and shoot alone, but after entering, before making any other action decisions, you must ask me everything and never make decisions without authorization. Understand?" It's true that Lu Ting is a mercenary, but if the employer doesn't listen and causes any other trouble in such a place where there are hidden dangers everywhere, and it affects him, then this hiring mission will not be worth the loss. So, before officially starting the employment task, there are some things that need to be noted, and Lu Ting still needs to clarify with the other party. If we can't reach an agreement, then divide the items early. The Huaxia female journalist sitting in the passenger seat, upon hearing Lu Ting's serious words, did not diminish her smile and said, "Don't worry, Mr. Lu, I understand all of this. The most important point." Lu Ting ignored the Chinese female journalist and prepared to continue speaking on his own. At this moment, the car happened to be driving to the traffic light. Lu Ting pressed the brake to stop the car and turned his head to look at the side face of the Huaxia female journalist, saying, "All information related to this employment task must not be concealed or deceived from me. Otherwise, I have the right to unilaterally interrupt this employment task." As the words fell, the Chinese female journalist stared at her eyes outside the car window, experiencing a momentary freeze and stagnation. But soon, the unnatural expression in her eyes was quickly concealed by her, and she turned her head to smile at Lu Ting, saying, "Mr. Lu, I'm just a journalist shooting a documentary. What can I hide from Mr. Lu?" Upon hearing this, Lu Ting gave her a deep glance and didn't say anything more. He only spoke with a hint of warning in his tone, "You'd better be. Everyone has secrets on them." Although Lu Ting can sense something, there is no need to expose it directly. As long as we can safely complete the employment task. After saying this sentence, the green light in front of him lit up, and Lu Ting stepped on the accelerator. The off-road pickup truck under him roared, and the tires raised a cloud of sand and dust before heading straight towards the location designated by the female journalist. Apart from a brief conversation when they first got on the car, the two of them had no further conversation along the way. Mercenaries should not talk too much to their employers. This is also the experience that Lu Ting has learned in the past 6 months. Because only in this way can we make more objective judgments when facing difficulties. The female journalist sitting in the passenger seat, seeing that Lu Ting had been frowning slightly and his face was full of serious expression, she no longer bothered to speak up. Soon, Lu Ting drove his off-road pickup truck through the bustling central urban area of Taka, and the surrounding buildings began to become low and dilapidated to the naked eye. The streets on both sides became increasingly dirty and messy, and a foul smell wafted through the windows of the car. Here, it is the most chaotic slum in Mengjiladaka, breeding and harboring all dark things. When Lu Ting drove his off-road pickup truck from the main road and turned into a narrower road, he could clearly see various shops on both sides of the street, or the crowds of people eating, shopping, and even the police officers patrolling the street, intentionally or unintentionally, scanning and observing his newly entered vehicle. With this wary and unfriendly gaze, Lu Ting could tell at a glance that they were standing guard. As for what the target is, it goes without saying. After turning here from the main road, the female journalist sitting in the passenger seat clearly became a bit nervous. Although she appears to have remained calm on the surface, her constant glances outside the car window still betray her true emotions. Seeing the situation, with one hand leaning against the edge of the car window, propping his head up, he looked straight at Lu Ting driving in front of him, and spoke in a faint tone, reminding him, "I advise you not to have too much eye contact with the people around you. These people who are lurking and watching in the crowd have all undergone professional training, and they have a very keen sense of smell for abnormal situations. Whenever there is something wrong, they will quickly detect it." And the reason why Lu Ting spoke out to remind female journalists is that he doesn't want to cause any more trouble. Although he is indeed a hired bodyguard, it's better to have one less thing than one more, isn't it? After hearing Lu Ting's words, the female journalist was also slightly stunned. Even after adjusting her sitting position, she relaxed her facial expression, and her eyes did not look at anything else randomly. After more than 10 minutes, Lu Ting drove an off-road pickup truck and successfully arrived at the location that the female journalist had agreed with him in advance. After parking the car, he looked at the female journalist beside him and asked again, "Are you sure you want to go in alone for an interview and shoot during this time period? Don't you need me to follow you?" When Lu Ting said this, he had absolutely no intention of caring about the other party. Lu Ting was just worried that if this person never came back, who should he ask for the latter half of the commission from? And the system will definitely determine that his task has failed and not give him a reward. "Don't worry, Mr. Lu. This Chinese female journalist is not foolish either." You can naturally hear the tone behind Lu Ting's words. She put on her black canvas bag again, opened the car door with her back hand, and smiled, saying, "Even if I don't come back, the second half of the commission will still be credited to your account on time." Upon hearing this, Lu Ting didn't say anything more, as he crossed the line and nodded at the female journalist, "I'll find a hotel nearby. I'll send you the specific address later. If there's any situation, you can come to me anytime. If the danger of the mission increases during this period, you can pay extra depending on the situation. There were no unexpected incidents. We will depart on time tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. After listening to Lu Ting quickly explain the remaining matters, the female journalist who had already got off the car gestured okay to him and said, "No problem, Mr. Lu." After speaking, she waved her hand at Lu Ting and turned to walk towards the deep alley in front of her. Sitting in the car, Lu Ting lit a cigarette until he saw the figure of the female journalist disappear into the corner ahead, and then slowly drove away from here with an off-road pickup truck. Mercenaries always act according to the employer's requirements, and as long as it's not within the scope of employment, Lu Ting naturally wouldn't be foolish enough to actively recruit them. After all, they work as mercenaries, in the true sense, using their lives to do things and make money. Lu Ting cannot help her unconditionally just because she is a woman and a Chinese. After delivering the Chinese female journalist to the designated location, Lu Ting immediately found a hotel nearby, opened a room, and sent the specific location of the hotel and his room number to the other party. In the hotel room, Lu Ting locked the door and closed the curtains, inspected the room, and after confirming that there were no issues, he sat by the bed, holding the reward he had just received from the system, Super Soldier Serum, in his hand. That's right, now he has decided to use this super serum and inject it into his own body. Thinking that in the near future, all the functions of his body will exceed the limit, thus reaching the peak of human potential, Ting felt an uncontrollable excitement in his heart. But when it comes to excitement, we still need to ask clearly about the usage of super serum, and we cannot act recklessly. Ting's mind twitched and he communicated with the system, can this super serum be injected directly into the body? Yes, will there be any adverse reactions? During the period of serum supplementation, there may be slight discomfort. Upon hearing this, Ting felt relieved. After taking a deep breath, he pulled out the lid of the long tube, exposed the sharp thin needle, and directly inserted the needle into his arm. A tube of super serum was quickly injected into Ting's body, and just as Ting had just removed the needle from his arm, a cramp-like excruciating pain suddenly engulfed his entire body. Hush, ah ah ah. Without any preparation, Ting immediately shouted out in panic. The excruciating pain was unbearable. He kept inhaling the air conditioning, forcing himself not to shout too loudly, to the point where he let out a low roar like a wild beast. Soon, Ting's wheat-colored skin turned red at a visible speed to the naked eye, and a large amount of sweat gushed out from every cell on his body. His forehead and neck were not, it should be said, bulging veins all over his body, making him appear incredibly ferocious. System, you come out, I promise not to kill you. Are you feeling a little uncomfortable, damn it? It's okay, the time it took for super serum to strengthen his body was not long. Just 3 minutes later, Ting was able to clearly perceive the intense pain in his limbs, which was like washing marrow and bones, gradually disappearing and dissipating. Instead, it was a wild and powerful warm current. This warm current of energy seemed inexhaustible, overflowing all over his body. And, at this point, what is being strengthened to the extreme is not only the muscles and bones throughout the body, but even the 5 senses, which are countless times more sensitive than before. End of this chapter. Chapter 5, 5. A $5 million mission. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5, 5. A $5 million mission. Feeling the powerful energy and warmth filling his body, Ting's face still turned red and covered in sweat, and his excited expression in his eyes became even more intense. He couldn't help but clench his hands into fists, a violent force that Ting had never possessed. And, Ting's 5 senses, including hearing and vision, also reached their peak at this time. He could clearly see the fluttering wings of small insects in the corner of the room, and could also hear the whispering voices of people from different directions outside the room. And the distance between them and Ting is about a few tens of meters, to about 100 meters. You know, in terms of basic human hearing, it is already difficult to hear what the other person is saying when they are over 10 to 20 meters tall. People with slightly better hearing may even be able to make a rough idea. Not to mention ordinary people, even well-trained special forces soldiers cannot do as clearly as Ting does now, listening to every word they say. Therefore, Ting couldn't help but marvel at the power of the system once again in his heart. At the same time, he also had a vague expectation in his heart: what kind of reward will the system give after each employment task that follows? After all, his first employment was just a simple security hiring task, and the system provided a good thing like super serum. If the difficulty of hiring tasks increases in the future, the task rewards provided by the system will definitely become more and more impressive. Of course, Ting is not the kind of person who takes on tasks without thinking. Before taking on each employment task, he will still make corresponding evaluations based on his own strength and the level of danger of the employment task. He wouldn't force himself to take on employment tasks that his own strength couldn't solve in order to obtain task rewards from the system. In that case, he might end up with nothing and even lose his own life in a tragic situation. In summary, I can't eat hot tofu in a hurry. As a qualified mercenary, if you want to live a long life, you must always maintain a clear mind. No matter what kind of temptation you face, you should consider yourself as the main starting point. Stay grounded and steadily move forward. So, even with generous rewards for system tasks, Ting must not make reckless decisions. Soon, after experiencing the tremendous changes brought to his body by the super serum once again, Ting's originally excited mood gradually suppressed and calmed down. Subsequently, Ting, who had restrained his thoughts, recycled the injected super serum needle and stuffed it into his backpack. Even if it was used up, he couldn't throw it around casually. For safety reasons, it's better to deal with it later. After completing these tasks, Ting took out clean clothes from his backpack and walked towards the bathroom in the room. The super serum just now made him sweat profusely, and now his whole body is soaked in sweat, wet and uncomfortable. Although Ting, as a mercenary, has long accepted the plan of not taking a shower for 3 to 5 days during his employment missions, given the current conditions, he still wants to take a shower before resting. After Ting had thoroughly washed himself, when he came out of the bathroom, the door of the room happened to be knocked on. He wiped his dripping hair with a towel and looked out at the cat's eye on the door. When Ting saw the hotel owner standing outside his room carrying food, he pulled open the safety latch on the door and opened the door from inside, leaving enough space for the hotel owner outside to pass the food in. After seeing off the Chinese female journalist and arriving at the designated location, it was already evening when he checked into the hotel. He noticed that there was a dining table in the lobby of the hotel, so Ting booked a dinner with the restaurant owner to fill his stomach. "Thank you." Ting's strong figure blocked the hotel owner's seemingly hopeless gaze towards the room, and after thanking him briefly in English, he quickly closed the door without giving the other person too much opportunity to explore. In places like Ladakh, where the whole country is mixed with good and bad people, one must always be very vigilant and beware of being ambushed. After all, the heart of defense is indispensable. Ting's dinner was very simple. 2 steaks, a tomato ramen noodles, and a glass of water were all the contents of the dinner. I don't know whether it was because of the super serum that strengthened his body. After eating these things, he felt only 7 points full. After meals, Ting casually pulled open the curtain on one side and looked out. At this moment, the sky had completely darkened, and the dim lights added a hint of desolation to the dirty and chaotic street with few people. After a brief observation of the environment, Ting closed the curtains again and then lay down on the bed. He took out his phone from his shirt pocket to contact his employer, but there were no caller ID or information notifications on it. It seems that the documentary about that Chinese female journalist went smoothly. Thinking of this, Ting didn't think much about it anymore. Being able to easily complete a task and smoothly receive a commission was his favorite thing to see. Immediately, Ting opened the dark web dedicated to mercenaries and wanted to see if there were any other employment tasks he could undertake locally in Ladakh. Actually, there are 2 modes for this mercenary dark web. The first one is provided to employers who are looking for mercenaries, to view basic information about each mercenary and the price of their employment. As for the other mode, it is for mercenaries to see. The dark web partition of this mode includes various types of international employment tasks, big and small. Mercenaries can also actively seek employment tasks, but whether the employer agrees or not is another matter. Once the employment task hanging on the dark web is taken, the information about the employment task will also disappear, and as for who took it, it will not be displayed on the dark web. Ting's fingers paused on the screen, adjusting the dark web page to the area of the Moncala card, and soon several employment task messages popped up. However, his gaze was already completely unable to move when he saw the first employment task at the top. There is no other reason, just because Ting first noticed that the employment task was followed by a series of 0 commission rewards. The commission for this employment task is a full 5 million meters of gold. Compared to the commission for this employment task, the next few tasks with only tens of thousands of commission fees seem somewhat insignificant. Immediately, Lu Ting, who had developed some interest in this, clicked in and looked at the information about employment tasks. Of course, at this moment, he simply wanted to see what kind of employment task it was in a place like Mengjia Ladakha where fish and dragons mixed with pearls could make employers bid 5 million meters of gold. After all, the employer is definitely not an ordinary character who can earn $5 million in Mengjia Ladakha. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. 6. Sudden Emergency. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Sudden Emergency. As expected, as soon as he entered, Lu Ting took a rough glance at the employment information and captured an important point. This employment task was to go to Mengjia Ladakha to save the son of an international criminal gang leader. The leader of this international criminal gang was recently caught by the Narcotics Control Bureau and imprisoned, while his rival in the business world, the enemy, took advantage of this and captured his precious son in Mengjia Ladakha. As for the person who arrested his son, there is also a mention in the employment information that he is the local gang leader in Mengjia Ladakha, named Arthur. Seeing this, in Lu Ting's heart, he had a plan. Simply put, he wanted to rescue the son of another drug lord from the hands of one drug lord. Although he was somewhat tempted by the commission of 5 million meters, it was obvious that this was not the employment task that Lu Ting could currently undertake. As the saying goes, strong dragons do not suppress local snakes. For local drug lords like Arthur, if Lu Ting dares to say that opposing him is equivalent to confronting more than half of the police and army in Mengjia Ladakha. Although the area of Mengjia Ladakha is not very large, there are not thousands or hundreds of police officers on duty all year round. You can't even imagine how many police officers have been bribed by drug lords like Arthur. If Lu Ting had a well-equipped and incredibly powerful mercenary team at this time, he might still consider the possibility of this employment mission. But now, in the situation where there is only one person with one gun, he can only take a look at these employment task information. Thinking of this, Lu Ting's heart couldn't help but overflow with a bit of bitterness. Once upon a time, their own indestructible armed group took on such employment tasks, which was just a matter of easy control for them. However, as soon as he thought of being bound to the strongest mercenary system, Lu Ting's gloomy emotions were immediately swept away. He believed that with the strong support of the system and his own efforts, his indestructible armed group would surely return to its former glory, even surpassing the past. Time flies. Lu Ting was once again full of fierce fighting spirit. He lowered his head to look at his phone screen again, only to find that the employment task that had just been at the top position had disappeared at this moment. Obviously, the employment task with a commission of up to 5 million meters of gold was just taken over by another professional team. Next, Lu Ting's gaze shifted downwards towards the next few employment tasks, but he also had no intention of actively contacting them. He just looked at the information of these employment tasks once. It's not too late to consider other employment tasks after the completion of this one. Next, Lu Ting wandered through the dark web for a moment, and only when he felt drowsy did he put down his phone, close his eyes, and rest. The security hiring task a few days ago was not too difficult, but it also left him without much rest for 2 whole nights. He had just gone through a process of strengthening his body with super serum, and now the drowsiness swept through, causing Lu Ting to quickly enter a state of shallow sleep. However, the phone used to contact the employer was still placed next to the pillow, and the ringtone was also turned on, making it convenient for the employer to contact them as soon as they needed it. But that night passed very peacefully. When Lu Ting was awakened by the gradually waking noise of the city streets, it was already past 7:05 in the morning. His first reaction when he opened his eyes was to go get his phone next to his pillow. As seen last night, there was no incoming call or message notification displayed on the phone screen, and there was still 1 hour and 55 minutes left until the agreed departure time between the two. Just as Lu Ting was getting up from bed, preparing to wash up and go out for breakfast, and then returning to his room to wait for the Chinese female journalist, the quiet door of the room that had been quiet all night was suddenly knocked on. Bang bang bang. The sound of someone knocking on the door outside is both urgent and heavy. Just because it sounds, it makes people feel that the other person seems to have something urgent. Actually, just now, while sitting in bed, Ting, who had been strengthened by super serum and had reached the pinnacle of human abilities in all aspects, had already heard a chaotic and heavy footsteps in the hallway outside the door. Bang bang bang. The knocking on the door rang out once again, urging Ting to open the door. As Ting stared at the door, a hint of contemplation flashed through his eyes. Apart from the Chinese female journalist, he couldn't think of anyone else who could knock on his door at this moment. Immediately, Ting left the bed lightly, but as he passed by the sofa, he casually pulled out the holster from his backpack and silently took out the Colt 10mm pistol. Although he had guessed most of the identity of the person outside the door in his heart, in order to avoid other situations, Ting still chose to take the weapon and be cautious. After all, if the person standing outside the room is really the Chinese female journalist, then her appearance is indeed somewhat sudden, and even not in line with common sense. Because before leaving yesterday, Ting had warned her to report to herself before making any action decisions, but from yesterday until now, the other party has not contacted him in any way. The area of the room was not large, and the distance from the bed to the door was not far. Ting walked 3 to 5 steps and arrived near the back of the door. At this point, he had not even looked out of the cat's eye when he first smelled a strong and extremely bloody smell. At the moment of smelling this bloody smell, his heart was instantly alarmed, and his mind immediately realized that something bad had happened. As expected, when Ting looked out the door through the cat's eye, he saw his employer, the Chinese female journalist who claimed to be just going to shoot a documentary about the lives of bottom-tier drug users who had gone astray. She was half-injured and leaning against the door. Seeing the situation, Ting's already serious expression immediately furrowed his brows tightly. Next, he quickly pulled open the safety latch and quickly pulled the Chinese female journalist at the door into the room. After closing the door tightly again, Ting turned around and glanced at the Chinese female journalist who was already half lying on the ground. Anger was constantly gathering between his furrowed eyebrows, with a strong momentum of rain and wind filling the building. But at this moment, Ting restrained his anger first and only lowered his voice to question her, "What did you do last night?" The Chinese female journalist, who was half lying against the wall, was wearing a beige jumpsuit that had been soaked in crimson blood for the most part. Dirty dust, soil, weeds, and blood covered her whole body. Yesterday, my high-tied ponytail was also crooked to one side, with a lot of scattered hair. My face was bruised and purple, with no good spot on it. There were bruises from heavy blows and wounds cut by sharp blades on it. The key is, on her right side of the waist and on her left arm and shoulder, there were fatal gunshot wounds, and at this time, blood was still oozing from the gun-hole wound. And in her right hand, which was powerless to hang by her side, she held not the camera that Ting had seen yesterday, but a ladies-only Smith Wesson M3919 LS 9mm pistol. From last night until now, even a discerning person can tell from the current appearance of this Chinese female journalist that she has definitely gone through a tough battle. And he almost lost his life before escaping. And the first time she saw the appearance of a Chinese female journalist, Ting knew that the other party's trip was definitely not just as she said, it was just as simple as filming a documentary. Or, in other words, the filming of a documentary was just a false gimmick she was looking for the true purpose of her trip. There are only two possibilities that Ting's mind can think of now. Either, the true purpose of this Chinese female journalist is not to shoot a documentary, but to have other things. Either, she did go to shoot a documentary last night, but the content she filmed was by no means an interview about a misguided low-level drug user. Anyway, one thing that can be confirmed now is that this Chinese female journalist did indeed engage in deceptive behavior towards Ting during her employment mission, and he could also clearly perceive that the other party was hiding quite a bit from him. After Ting finished asking that question, the Chinese female journalist, who was half lying against the wall, did not intend to answer for a moment. Seeing the situation, Lu Ting listened carefully outside the room to see if there was any movement, while enduring his limited temper and asking again, "You must tell me what happened so that I can come up with a solution." Actually, as early as yesterday when he was still in the car, he had already noticed that this Chinese female journalist was intentionally hiding some secrets from him. However, at that time, Lu Ting did not intend to expose her, just wanted to complete this employment task safely. But now, there is clearly no possibility of successfully completing this employment task in peace. However, Lu Ting is not someone without professional ethics. Since he has taken on this employment task, he will definitely abide by the content of the task and ensure the safety of this Chinese female journalist. Although the other party was already injured at this time, it was also the result of her unilateral actions. In the following time, Lu Ting will do his best to protect her life's safety. Finally, under Lu Ting's repeated inquiry, the Chinese female journalist finally spoke up, only to hear her say angrily, "Mr. Lu, I'm sorry that I did hide some things from you." End of this chapter. Chapter 7. The True Identity of Chinese Female Journalists and New Tasks. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. The True Identity of Chinese Female Journalists and New Tasks. Under Lu Ting's repeated inquiry, the Chinese female journalist finally spoke up, only to hear her say angrily, "Mr. Lu, I'm sorry I did hide something from you." Upon hearing this, Lu Ting's furrowed brows did not loosen at all due to the other party's apology. Soon, he quickly walked to the sofa, took out some emergency medicine from his backpack, and returned to the side of this Chinese female journalist, preparing to listen to her while helping her heal her wound. But to my surprise, Lu Tingang was about to use hemostatic gauze to press down on her bleeding gun-hole wound, but the other party grabbed her hand in the opposite direction. The Chinese female journalist continued to speak weakly, "No, don't waste time. This is useless, cough. I can't live anymore, but Mr. Lu, I hope you can take on another employment task for me." Speaking, the Chinese female journalist was a storage card covered in sticky blood, stuffed into Lu Ting's hand, and showed a pleading expression before saying, "Help me deliver this to the hands of the Chinese International Police." "Mr. Lu, don't worry. After the task is completed, Huaxia will definitely provide you with generous commission rewards." Upon hearing this, Lu Ting suddenly felt his eyelids twitch, and the memory card in his hand, which had no temperature at all, became very hot at this moment. International Criminal Police. Hello, you're not joking with me, are you? Why suddenly got involved with Huaxia International Criminal Police? Still say she herself is the Huaxia International Criminal Police. Thinking about it this way, it seems that many things can be explained. No wonder, she dares to go alone to the most chaotic slums of Mengjiao Ladakha. No wonder, she specifically indicated in the hiring task that there is no need for mercenaries or bodyguards to follow throughout the entire process. When the two of them were sitting in the car before, Lu Ting observed that the palms of her hands and the calluses on her tiger's mouth were not formed by holding up the camera all year round, but were ground out like herself due to prolonged use of firearms. She is not a newborn calf who is not afraid of tigers, but she does have something to rely on and comes prepared. Time flies. Lu Ting's frowns, which were already tightly furrowed together, instantly became even tighter. The reason is very simple. Since this matter can be related to Interpol, it proves that the content in the storage card in my hand is definitely not simple. It's not an exaggeration to say that it's a deadly big trouble. Thinking of this, without hesitation for a moment, Lu Ting immediately put the hot potato in his hand back into the woman's hand and said indifferently, "I'm sorry, I can't accept this employment task. You know, I'm the only one in my team, and with my abilities, I can't help you at all." Faced with the woman's pleading, Lu Ting did not show any mercy, let alone any pity for her. He now knows very well that this matter is definitely not easy, and he must not be involved enough, otherwise he will be in danger. After hearing that Lu Ting had rejected her, the woman's pale and bloodless face immediately intensified her pleading expression. Her occasional gaze towards the door was filled with panic, and she could only plead with Lu Ting again, "Please, Mr. Lu. No matter how much commission you want, we will give it. Just ask. Just ask you to bring this thing to Huaxia International Criminal Police. The things inside are really important to all of us." Upon hearing this, Lu Ting's emotionless gaze turned towards the woman in front of him, who was covered in injuries and on the brink of death. He believed that if the other person had any extra strength, they would kneel down and kowtow to pray without hesitation. But, the current situation is clearly a big trouble, how could Lu Ting possibly take it on himself? After pondering for half a second, he spoke again and refused, "Sorry, it's not a matter of money. I know this thing is important to you. It's important to you, but for me, my life is the most important thing." Lu Ting indeed wants to make big money and revive his armed group, but the premise is that if he earns this big money, he also needs to spend his life, right? Immediately, Lu Ting didn't want to waste time and words with her anymore. He made a merciless decision and said directly, "Unfortunately, from now on, our employment relationship is over." If it weren't for the last resort, he really wouldn't want to take the initiative to end a hiring task. Not receiving the last 1/3 of the commission was a small matter, and what made Lu Tingzi even more concerned was that as he watched the upcoming system task reward, he flew away like a cooked duck. But the current situation is indeed forcing him to make such a decision. After all, leaving now, he only loses commission and a system task reward, but if he stays, then he will lose more than just commission and system task rewards. Next, Lu Ting turned around and stepped forward to leave. At this moment, it is obvious that the place where I live is no longer suitable for staying for a long time. If she causes any big trouble, then the other party will definitely not give up until they put her to death. Lu Ting couldn't guess exactly what the trouble this woman caused, but he thought it was most likely related to drugs. And in the city of Mengjia Ladakha, getting into trouble with local drug lords and traffickers is no different from getting into trouble with a group of tarsal maggots. Within an hour, no. In less than half an hour, there will definitely be someone chasing after the flavor to find it. Lu Ting didn't want to be trapped in the chaos, so after clarifying with this woman, his first reaction was to evacuate as soon as possible, leave this room, leave this hotel. Just leave the place of Mengjia Ladakha. These drug lords and traffickers have a plethora of terrorist elements under their command. With just one command from their leader, they will charge forward and encircle and suppress the enemy as if they were not deadly. That taste is absolutely uncomfortable. You know, the drug lords and traffickers of every country are special forces in the elite forces of various countries, and they do not want to be entangled with them too much. You can imagine how difficult they are to deal with. No. Mr. Lu, please don't leave. At this point, the woman, who was already on the brink of death and half leaning against the wall, saw Lu Ting turning around with a cold and ruthless expression on her face. She didn't know where the strength came from, but suddenly rushed forward and grabbed the corner of Lu Ting's pants with her hands covered in thick, crimson blood. "Mr. Lu, I know I have concealed, deceived, and offended you. It is not right for me to do so. The outcome will be like this now, and it is my own fault. I have already anticipated the current outcome. So, last night, I had already pre-booked the remittance time, and the remaining commission will be credited to your account at 8 o'clock this morning on time." Speaking of which, the woman holding onto the corner of Lu Ting's pants suddenly felt pain in her expression. A large mouthful of thick crimson blood spat out from her mouth, as if she was suffering immense agony. After spitting out this mouthful of blood, Lu Ting could clearly feel that the woman's aura around her body was once again withering in an instant. Ding. Meanwhile, just as she finished speaking forcefully, the system beeped. Next, the system panel that was only visible to Lu Ting appeared in front of him. The strongest mercenary system, host. Lu Ting, reputation. 0, task. Protect Chinese female journalists who want to shoot documentaries on drug addicts. Completed, rewards are currently being settled, obviously, because of this woman's words and her proactive settlement of the remaining commission, the system determined the completion of Lu Ting's employment task. Looking at the last column displayed on the system panel, the task reward was being settled, and there was no change in Lu Ting's rational and composed eyes at this moment. And at this point, lying on the ground with all his last strength, he looked up at Lu Ting's woman and pleaded for the last time, "Mr. Lu, please help me bring the things to the Huaxia International Criminal Police." I see, the large amount of blood flowing from the woman's mouth, the tearful and red eyes, and the deep pleading expression in her pitch-black pupils all added a touch of delicacy and pity to her. If it were an ordinary person, seeing this scene at this moment, they would definitely not have the heart to refuse the bitter plea of a woman who is clearly about to die. But Lu Ting is obviously not an ordinary person, and he will not have any sympathy for this woman just because she voluntarily settles commissions for him. Because whether it's the remaining 1/3 of the commission or the rewards for system tasks, they are just what Lu Ting deserves. Please. At this point, the woman lying on the ground, grabbing one corner of Lu Ting's pants leg, once again spewed out the last two words in a flurry of anger, her head slowly drooped downwards. Her hand, which was gripping the corner of Lu Ting's pants, also slowly loosened along with it. Lu Ting clearly saw the woman's body lying on the ground, without any changes in the amplitude of her breathing fluctuations. It was remarkable that she had died after running out of oil and running out of lights. End of this chapter. Chapter 8, Divine Flying Knife Technique. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8, Divine Flying Knife Technique. Task Settlement Completed, Reward. Divine Flying Knife Technique. The flying knife technique has reached a state of ecstasy. A leaf, a card, or a stone can all be used as a flying knife, with astonishing power. Just as the woman lost her signs of life and breathed a sigh of relief in front of Lu Ting, a prompt sound rang in his mind, indicating the end of the system task settlement. However, after hearing the reward given by the system, Lu Ting was also slightly surprised and stunned. Obviously, the difference between the reward for this second mission and the reward for the first mission was too wide. It seems that the rewards for each task are randomly generated based on the system's mood, without any regularity. Next, Lu Ting focused his attention on the reward itself, and when he saw a comment following, he felt that instead of saying it was a divine-level flying knife technique, it was more appropriate to say it was a divine-level flying strike technique. After all, everything can be used to fly. However, this looks quite cool and impressive. No matter what. Since it is a reward given by the system, after integrating and using it on your own, the precision and killing effects of flying towards all things will definitely not be much worse. Will the body react in integrating this divine-level flying knife technique into the system? Previously, when using Super Serum, Lu Ting had already been psychologically tricked by the system, so it was only at this time that he cautiously asked in advance. Because if the fusion of this divine-level flying knife technique can be completed in an instant without causing any reaction to the body, then Lu Ting's plan is to immediately merge it into his body and let it go. But if during the fusion period, there will be a severe reaction in the body like last night's injection of Super Serum, then he will temporarily store this reward in the system. After all, at this moment, I have other more urgent things to do. Ding, the fusion of divine-level flying knife techniques will not have any feeling, please use it with confidence. Upon hearing the answer given by the system in his mind, Lu Ting hesitated for half a second before choosing to trust the old sick system again. He nodded and said, "Okay, let's merge now." Ding, integrating divine-level flying knife techniques. Ding, the fusion of divine-level flying knife skills has been completed almost the second after Lu Ting's words fell to the ground, for system prompts appeared in his mind, but he had not yet reacted. The fusion of divine-level flying knife skills was completed. At the same time, Lu Ting's mind also had a lot of information about the flying knife technique. So fast. The rapid fusion speed surprised even Lu Ting in his heart. It seems like the conversation between him and the system was quite lengthy, but in fact, it was all completed in just a few seconds. However, now Lu Ting doesn't have time to experiment with this divine-level flying knife technique. Next, Lu Ting's thoughts and attention were redirected back to this woman. I see, the storage card that she had previously stuffed into Lu Ting's hand and then pushed back by Lu Ting lay quietly on the ground at his feet. The employment task entrusted to Lu Ting by this woman before her death had no intention of following, so Lu Ting's gaze was only on the blood-stained storage card, casually glancing at it. Then he took a big step and walked straight towards the sofa. Soon, Lu Ting took out his tactical backpack with a backhand and changed into clothes he hadn't washed before after taking a shower yesterday. The clothes he was wearing now had already been stained with a large amount of blood just now. If you want to leave here without attracting any attention, it's definitely not possible to have blood on your body. After quickly changing off the clothes stained with blood, Lu Ting threw them into the trash can. Then, he took out the spare pistol from the tactical backpack compartment, and stuffed the Glock G17 pistol into the back waist side for emergency use. The other Colt 10mm pistol was secretly held by Lu Ting, and soon he threw his backpack onto his back, ready to leave. However, just at this moment, Lu Ting, who had already surpassed the average person's hearing by dozens of times, heard an incredibly noisy noise coming from the street outside the window behind him. Upon hearing the sound, Lu Ting immediately reacted quickly, dodging his body from the window and leaning against the wall by the window. He reached out his hand and gently pulled the curtain, exposing a gap to observe the situation on the street. At this moment, on the street at the entrance of the first floor of the hotel where Lu Ting is located, 4 or 5 small vans capable of accommodating 10 to 15 people stopped. Soon, as the car door was quickly pulled open from inside, one by one with dark skin and fierce faces, holding AK rifles and different models of submachine guns, the poisonous insects and villains rushed out of the car. Meanwhile, on the busy streets on both sides of this hotel, there are other poisonous insects and villains driving motorcycles rushing over. The well-trained group of poisonous insects and villains gathered at the hotel entrance, and one of them, who looked like a small-headed man, stood in front of them, speaking fiercely. That damn bitch stole our things, and once that thing is handed over to the Huaxia International Police, we'll all be ruined. Speaking of which, the leading man raised a photo in his hand and continued, look at your big dog eyes clearly, then remember the appearance of this bitch and find her from here. After speaking, the leading man waved his hand abruptly, signaling his subordinates to take action. Next second, the 40 or 50 poisonous insects and villains holding firearms and weapons in front of him suddenly stormed into the hotel and began a carpet-like search. Faced with such a large number of ferocious thugs, the hotel owner had long been so scared that he hid behind the front desk cabinet, his whole body trembling with fear. How dare he speak a word? And soon, in the rooms located on the first floor of the hotel, there were constant screams of panic from passengers who were forcibly broken into by criminals. The commotion caused by the poisonous insects and villains downstairs in the hotel caught Lu Ting's attention. His eyebrows furrowed at this moment, clearly not expecting these people to come so quickly. You know, it has been less than 20 minutes since this woman knocked on her door. It seems that she has indeed dug up a big basket in the poisonous nest of Mengjialadaka. Otherwise, how could these poisonous insect villains have chased here in such a short time? It seems a bit troublesome. Thinking of this, Lu Ting suddenly felt very annoyed and smashed his mouth. Then he put on sunglasses and the hat that came with his jacket, dressing himself up as a passenger who was no different from an ordinary person. Although the group of poisonous insects and villains had already found the door, Lu Ting could not have stayed in his room and not left. After all, in his room right now, the body of this woman was lying with great thorns. End of this chapter. Chapter 9, Getting a Gun on Your Head. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9, Getting a Gun on Your Head. Moreover, on the corridor outside, she must have walked all the way, dripping many traces of blood. As long as those poisonous insects and villains come to his floor and pay a little attention to the traces under his feet, they can follow the traces of blood and find Lu Ting's room. So, the longer you stay in this hotel now, the more troublesome the situation will become. Immediately, after taking a deep breath, Lu Ting opened the door and walked straight out. As soon as he left the room, he walked towards the end of the corridor on his right without any hesitation. When checking into this hotel yesterday, Lu Ting had already figured out that there was a back door in the kitchen that led directly to another street. And down the stairs at the end of the corridor on the right is the closest road to the hotel kitchen. Get out. Bitch. Shut up. Don't shout. If you call me again, I'll shoot your mouth with a gun. Have you seen this woman before? When they reached the staircase, the voices of those poisonous insects and villains became even clearer for a moment. Even, when Lu Ting stood at the edge of the handrail of the stairs and looked down one level, he could still see the poisonous insects and thugs with guns, cruelly punching and kicking innocent residents. Seeing this scene, under the cover of sunglasses, there was a slight change in the emotions of Lu Ting's eyes. Although he had made a lot of psychological preparations, at this moment, he couldn't help but feel a little nervous in his heart. At the end of the day, this is also the first time since he became a mercenary that he has faced such a large number of poisonous insect villains alone. It is absolutely impossible to say that there is no emotional change in his heart. But this is the end of the matter. Lu Ting could only stabilize his mentality, then pretend to be calm and continue walking down the stairs. Never thought, he had just walked to the connecting platform of the two stairs when he met the poisonous insects and villains who had just finished searching the second-floor room and went upstairs. At this moment, both sides were directly face-to-face and had a face-to-face meeting. Even, Lu Ting's eyes, hidden under black sunglasses, had already met the gaze of one of the villains who was rushing at the forefront, caught off guard. Of course, with sunglasses on, it was naturally impossible for the poisonous insect villain on the other side to meet Lu Ting's gaze through the sunglasses. This was just his one-sided gaze. However, since they have already encountered Lu Ting in a narrow space like the stairs, these poisonous insect villains naturally have no reason to let go. Even though Lu Ting was tall and muscular, looking very capable from top to bottom, as if he was not easy to bully, in the eyes of these poisonous insects and villains, he was nothing at all. After all, I have a gun in my hand. No matter how powerful he is, can he be as powerful as a gun? So, just as Lu Ting was about to pass by these poisonous insect villains, one of them suddenly raised his hand and used his AK assault rifle to block his way. He gestured to the people behind him to take out the woman's photo and ask in English, "Hey, have you ever seen this woman here?" Upon hearing this, Lu Ting's gaze, blocked by sunglasses, turned towards the photo in the hand of the poisonous insect villain. As expected, the woman in the photo is her own employer, and she is still wearing police uniform. Lu Ting's previous speculation about her identity was not wrong. The real identity that the other party had concealed from the beginning was a Huaxia International Criminal Police officer. Next second, he shook his head with an unchanged expression on his face and answered in English, "Sorry, I haven't seen you before." After speaking, Lu Ting took another step and was about to walk towards the bottom of the stairs. And the several poisonous insects and villains who had originally held him back did not show any intention of blocking him anymore, because the other party seemed to be truly unaware of it. Since they haven't seen this damn woman before, there's no need for them to continue wasting time. But, just as Lu Ting passed by a poisonous insect villain at close range from the far left position of the stairs, he was caught off guard. The poisonous insect villain smelled him and a faint smell of blood drifted out, overflowing with the wind. "Wait!" The poisonous insect villain immediately spoke out and called out to Lu Ting, and when he looked at him again, his eyes were also full of suspicion. Long ago, Lu Ting said that the drug lords and traffickers of Mengjia Ladakha are very intelligent, and their own subordinates are also trained to be suspicious. Any abnormal situation that does not conform to common sense can arouse their critical suspicion. And now the situation is like this. I see. The poisonous insect villain turned around and walked slowly to the vicinity of Lu Ting. He first looked up and down at Lu Ting, then suddenly approached his body and took a deep sniff of the smell on him. Next second, the expression on the face of this poisonous insect villain suddenly became unusually fierce, revealing teeth that had turned yellow and black due to drug use. He gritted his teeth and said, "You're lying. If only from the appearance, this kid is as strong as a cow, and there is no sign of injury around his body, so, here comes the problem. Well done, how could a resident living in a hotel carry a bloody smell?" At the same time as the words fell, the other three poisonous insect villains who accompanied him immediately became alert. Their gaze, full of scrutiny, also began to constantly scan Lu Ting's body. And Lu Ting didn't expect that even though he had changed into his clothes stained with a lot of blood, he was still smelled by the poisonous insect villain in front of him. Is this guy a dog nose, so agile? The impatient poisonous insect villain, within 2 or 3 seconds of Lu Ting's choice to temporarily remain silent and observe the situation, turned his hand to the muzzle of his pistol and pressed it against Lu Ting's neck, threatening fiercely, "Damn it. I'll give you one last chance. Have you ever seen this woman before?" According to the information from the surrounding eyeliner, the woman in the photo did escape into the hotel after leaving their stronghold. But in reality, the real situation was not that she escaped on her own, but that their boss ordered her to escape. As for the reason, it's very simple. Firstly, if an Interpol can smoothly infiltrate one of their important strongholds, then there must be traitors among their own people, which is beyond doubt. But at the same time, their boss also believes that this female Interpol should not be the only one on this trip. It is very likely that there are other companions hiding and waiting in the dark to receive them. It is precisely because of this consideration that the boss pretended to let her escape. If this female Interpol had a companion, then, in the case of being seriously injured, she would definitely want to hand over what she had in her hand to her companion as soon as possible. As expected, their eyeliner watched all the way secretly, and it was not until she entered the hotel to find someone. Under the command of the boss, this group of poisonous insects and villains did not startle the snake. Instead, they gathered a sufficient number of people before rushing over as quickly as possible, preparing to catch the female Interpol and her companions all in one go. And these poisonous insect villains all know that when the female Interpol escaped from their stronghold, she had wounds all over her body, as well as 2 fatal wounds from gunshots. She had to shed several small stalls of blood every few steps she took. The man in front of him can smell blood, which indicates that he must have had close contact with someone who was injured and had a huge amount of bleeding recently. As for who he is in contact with, even if he thinks with his toes, he can know. So, this poisonous insect villain can confirm and affirm that he has seen that woman. Speak up. Seeing that Lu Ting was still a dead duck with a stiff mouth and closed his mouth for a long time without saying a word, the poisonous insect villain couldn't help but push the handgun muzzle against his neck with force again, indicating a clear threat. Feeling the cold muzzle of the pistol pressing against his neck, Lu Ting's eyebrows unconsciously furrowed slightly. A chilling killing intent appeared in his eyes under the cover of sunglasses. At the same time, he kept it in his shirt pocket, holding Colt's 10mm pistol in his right hand, which also instinctively tightened. No one likes to be shot at their neck, and Lu Ting is no exception. However, considering the current situation, he still chooses to hold back for a while. Although there are only 4 poisonous insect villains in front of him at this moment, and Lu Ting is confident that he can unexpectedly eliminate them all within 10 seconds, the movement here will definitely attract other poisonous insect villains from other positions to come soon. At that time, he is afraid that he will be trapped in the encirclement. So, it's better to do less than to do more. If you can try to solve the current situation peacefully, then it's better not to provoke any other troubles. But just as Lu Ting quickly brainstormed and was about to answer the question of this poisonous insect villain, another poisonous insect villain standing on a higher step suddenly asked him, "Hey! Take off your sunglasses." End of this chapter. Chapter 10. 10. Bloodbath. Maximizing benefits. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. 10. Bloodbath. Maximizing benefits. I asked you to take off your sunglasses, did you hear me? Or are you a deaf person? When this poisonous insect villain heard his companion suspect Lu Ting, the more he looked at him, the more he felt something was wrong. Although Lu Ting was wearing a hat and using a pair of sunglasses to cover most of his face at this time, his exposed skin color in other places made it clear at a glance that he was not white or black. The yellow skin of the man in front of him belongs mostly to people in Asia, and the woman who stole important information from their stronghold last night is also Asian. If it were at any other ordinary time, this group of poisonous insect villains would not have connected the two, but the current situation makes them have to doubt more about some coincidences. So, in order to ensure that the woman and her companions will not slip away under their own noses, these poisonous insect villains have also been careful and cautious to the extreme. And when Lu Ting heard the other party ask him to take off his sunglasses, he immediately knew about today's matter in his heart, probably unable to resolve it peacefully. His gaze, hidden under his sunglasses, glanced at the poisonous insect villain who was speaking. After a pause of 1 or 2 seconds, he reached out and took off his sunglasses from his face. At this time, the more you appear guilty and scared, the more you will increase your suspicion. It's better to show them openly. When Lu Ting took off his sunglasses and revealed his original appearance, he could clearly see these poisonous insects and villains, and his gaze on his face changed accordingly. Are you from China? The poisonous insect villain who was closest to Lu Ting and pressed the muzzle of his pistol against his neck. After asking this question, he carefully stared at his face and observed. Whenever the other party shows any signs of lying, they will not hesitate to take action. I would rather kill the wrong person than let it go. Upon hearing this, on Lu Ting's expressionless face, there was no emotional fluctuation, and he said calmly, I am from China, but not from China. As for the woman in your photo, I haven't seen her before. I just saw a lot of blood stains in the hallway upstairs. I think you can go upstairs and look for her. Although Lu Ting's words were mixed with truth and falsehood, he didn't even move his eyelids when he spoke, which seemed to have a high level of credibility. And these few poisonous insect villains who blocked Lu Ting obviously didn't know whether to believe him or not. After exchanging glances, the leader of the poisonous insect villains said, blood stains. Where is it? Take us to see. They didn't intend to let Lu Ting go like this, because the four of them always felt an indescribable sense of suspicion in this kid's body. Buzzing. At this moment, with the muzzle of his pistol pressed against the poisonous insect villain at Lu Ting's chin and neck, the phone in his shirt pocket shook inappropriately. He took out his phone with the free hand and immediately answered it when he saw that it was his boss calling. Hello, boss. Boss, they found out that this damn woman entered the country with a fake identity. After she came in to answer the card, she also hired a mercenary on the dark web, who is likely to be an informant. The photo information of the mercenary was sent to your phone, and the boss said, if you encounter it, don't hesitate, just kill it. He wants to see the dead. Okay, boss. After a quick call, the poisonous insect villain hung up the phone. Soon, with another single vibration from his phone, a new message was sent to him, clearly indicating that the boss had sent the photo information of the mercenary. Seeing the situation, the poisonous insect villain didn't hesitate at all and simply clicked on this information popped up. Just entered a little earlier, a photo of a man that made him feel familiar with him caught his eye. I see, isn't this typical Asian Chinese man's face in the photo the person who is currently using the muzzle of a pistol to press against his chin and neck? He is the mercenary hired by Huaxia International Criminal Police under a false identity. After reacting, the pupils of the poisonous insect villain suddenly shrank twice, and even if he wanted to directly attack Lu Ting, he shot and killed him. After all, just now, the the boss said on the phone that the boss above doesn't want any living people, only dead people. But who would have thought, he just managed to shift his gaze away from the phone screen, and as soon as he looked up, he was easily pierced in the head by a bullet. Geo. A handgun sound was muffled by a silencer and suddenly rang out in the cramped space at the staircase. He used his pistol to counter the poisonous insect villain at Lu Ting's neck and jaw, and without even a chance to take action, he took his life with a sharp and decisive shot. Geo. 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 After firing the first shot, Lu Ting did not hesitate to pull the trigger one after another and accurately shot 3 10mm bullets into the heads of the 3 villains and poisonous insects who had not yet realized what was going on. Bang! After 3 or 4 consecutive sounds of heavy objects falling to the ground, these few blocked Lu Ting's way to the poisonous insect villain, and they all fell into a pool of blood, dying to the point where they could no longer die. As for why Lu Ting suddenly exposed himself to these poisonous insect villains, the reason is simple. He has already been implicated by that woman, exposing his appearance and identity information. Although the poisonous insect villain spoke the local language of Mengjia Ladaka on the phone just now, Lu Ting couldn't understand a single word. However, when he saw his photo and identity information hanging on the dark web, appearing on the phone of the poisonous insect villain, Lu Ting was very keen to realize that he must also be involved in this muddy water. Otherwise, why did the other party suddenly start investigating his information when they were looking for that woman very well? He must have been investigated by the other party about his own employment, and in order to ensure that everything is safe, he was also included in the list of pursuers. And, just now, after seeing the information on his phone, the poisonous insect villain immediately had the idea of taking action with him. Therefore, Lu Ting did not hesitate and took the initiative to seize the opportunity. What sound? Did that sound of gunfire just now? Something's wrong. There's a situation upstairs. Call everyone over. However, just as Lu Ting quickly shot and dealt with the poisonous insects and villains in front of him, other people closer to the staircase also keenly heard the movement. After realizing that the situation was not right, they quickly reacted and rushed towards this side. Soon, Lu Ting heard a series of very chaotic footsteps coming from the floors and stairs below, clearly indicating that there were many people coming. There's no way, even though Lu Ting had already installed a muzzle on the pistol in advance, the sound produced when firing could not be completely silenced. So when Lu Zheng heard the news coming from the lower floor, he could only choose to give up the road, return to the original way, and leave by the stairs on the other side of the corridor. The next second, Lu Ting didn't waste time, turned around and took big strides back upstairs. When passing by the room where he used to live, hesitating for half a second, Lu Ting pushed open the door with his back hand and quickly walked in to pick up the storage card that had fallen on the ground next to the woman's hand. That's right, Lu Ting's current plan is to accept the employment task of a woman before her death. Previously, he had been refusing women's employment requests because he realized that it was not easy and did not want to wade into this muddy water alone. After all, given his current situation and strength, Lu Ting was indeed afraid that he would end up with no money or resources. But now, the situation is different. Even if he didn't want to get involved, the drug lord who had already been provoked by that woman saw it as a problem that needed to be solved. Since he has already been involved in this turmoil, as a mercenary, Lu Ting must seek maximum benefits for himself in this chaos. End of this chapter.